at the Korean War, a conflict that would forever change the course of history, a name etched in history, symbolizing the struggle and sacrifice of countless individuals. It is a story of a people divided, a land torn apart by global forces beyond their control. This war, lasting from 1950 to 1953, became a pivotal chapter in the early Cold War. It pitted neighbor against neighbor, brother against brother, leaving scars that would take generations to heal. The Korean War serves as a reminder of the human cost of conflict and the enduring desire for peace. This conflict was not merely a regional struggle. It had far-reaching implications that drew the attention of the entire world. To truly understand the Korean War, we must journey back in time. We must delve into the history of Korea before the conflict. For centuries, Korea existed as a unified kingdom, proud and independent. However, the late 19th and early 20th centuries brought turmoil and change. Japan, a rising power in Asia, had its sights set on Korea. After the Russo-Japanese War in 1905, Japan formally annexed Korea. Japanese rule was harsh. Koreans faced cultural oppression and economic exploitation. Despite the difficult circumstances, the Korean people never relinquished their dream of independence. Resistance movements sprung up across the country. These movements kept the spirit of freedom alive during the long years of Japanese occupation. The end of World War II in 1945 brought hope for a new beginning for Korea. Japan's defeat meant liberation from decades of colonial rule. However, the joy of liberation would be short-lived. Korea, once a unified nation, found itself divided once more. In the aftermath of World War II, the Allied powers agreed to divide Korea temporarily. The 38th parallel, an arbitrary line drawn across the Korean peninsula, became the dividing line. The Soviet Union occupied the north, while the United States administered the south. This division, intended to be temporary, soon solidified into a hardened political reality. Two separate states emerged, the Communist Democratic People's Republic of Korea in the north and the Capitalist Republic of Korea in the south. Tensions between North and South Korea simmered for years after the division. Both sides engaged in border skirmishes and propaganda campaigns. Then, on June 25, 1950, the simmering tensions boiled over into open warfare. North Korean forces, armed and supplied by the Soviet Union, launched a surprise attack across the 38th parallel. The invasion marked the beginning of the Korean War. The North Korean People's Army, well-equipped and motivated, made rapid advances southward. Seoul, the capital of South Korea, fell to the North Koreans within days. The South Korean army, outnumbered and outgunned, fought bravely but struggled to hold back the communist forces. The situation looked dire for the young Republic of Korea. Section 5. Turning the tide, hope at Incheon. As North Korean forces closed in on the last remaining South Korean troops, a daring plan was hatched. The situation was dire, with South Korean defenses crumbling under the relentless assault. General Douglas MacArthur, commander of the United Nations forces, conceived of an amphibious landing at Incheon. This bold strategy aimed to outflank the North Korean army and relieve the pressure on the beleaguered South Korean troops. Incheon, a port city west of Seoul, was a strategic location. Its capture would allow the UN forces to cut off North Korean supply lines and create a new front in the war. The Incheon Landing, a risky gamble, proved to be a turning point in the war. The operation required precise timing and coordination, with the tides and narrow channels posing significant challenges. On September 15, 1950, UN forces led by the United States Marines stormed the beaches of Incheon. The element of surprise was crucial, and the Marines executed their mission with remarkable efficiency. The landing caught the North Koreans off guard, cutting their supply lines and forcing a retreat. The sudden shift in momentum disrupted the North Korean advance and provided a much-needed respite for the South Korean forces. The success at Incheon allowed UN and South Korean forces to push back the North Korean army. This victory revitalized the morale of the South Korean troops and their allies. Seoul was recaptured, and the tide of the war seemed to be turning in favor of the South. The liberation of the capital was a symbolic and strategic victory. However, the conflict was far from over. Despite the success at Incheon, the war would continue to rage on, with many more battles to be fought and lives to be lost. Section 6. A new enemy enters the fray: China's impact. As UN and South Korean troops advanced northward, approaching the Yalu River bordering China, a new threat emerged. China, fearing an American presence on its border, entered the war in support of North Korea. Chinese troops, known as the People's Volunteer Army, poured across the border in massive numbers. The Chinese intervention, a shock to the UN forces, dramatically altered the course of the war. The Chinese army, fighting with tenacity and determination, pushed back the UN and South Korean forces. The war entered a new phase of bloody stalemate. Battles raged back and forth across the Korean peninsula, with neither side able to achieve a decisive victory. The conflict had become a war of attrition, a grinding struggle with no end in sight. Section 7, Stalemate and Sorrow, the Long Road to Armistice. For nearly 2 years after China's entry into the war, the conflict raged on. Battles raged across the Korean peninsula, resulting in staggering casualties on both sides. Negotiations for a ceasefire began in 1951, but the fighting continued. Finally, on July 27, 1953, an armistice agreement was signed at Panmunjom. The agreement established a demilitarized zone, or DMZ, along the 38th parallel, effectively dividing Korea once more. The Korean War had come to an end, but not with a treaty. No peace treaty was ever signed, leaving the two Koreas technically still at war. Section 8. Scars of War, Seeds of Hope, Korea after the conflict. The Korean War left an indelible mark on the Korean peninsula and the world. Millions of people perished in the conflict, both soldiers and civilians. Families were torn apart, and the land was scarred by years of fighting. The war also had a profound impact on the global political landscape, intensifying the Cold War rivalry between the United States and the Soviet Union. Despite the devastation, the people of Korea displayed remarkable resilience. South Korea, with substantial aid from the United States and other nations, embarked on a path of economic recovery and development. North Korea, under the leadership of Kim Il-sung, pursued a policy of self-reliance and isolation. Section 9. Remembering the past, building the future, the legacy of the Korean War. The Korean War, often referred to as the Forgotten War, has left an indelible mark on history and continues to influence the present and future. The Korean War stands as a stark reminder of the human cost of conflict and the importance of diplomacy and peace. The devastation wrought by the war is evident in the haunting images of war-torn cities and the countless lives disrupted. While the two Koreas remain divided today, the legacy of the war continues to shape the region and the world. The stark contrast between the bustling streets of Seoul and the more austere Pyongyang highlights the ongoing division and the different paths taken by the two nations. The DMZ, once a heavily fortified border, has evolved into an unintended nature preserve. This strip of land, devoid of human habitation, has become a sanctuary for wildlife, symbolizing a paradoxical peace in a place born out of conflict. It serves as a symbol of the fragile peace and the enduring hope for reunification. Peace rallies and movements within Korea reflect the deep-seated desire among many for a future where the peninsula is united once more. The Korean War Memorial in Washington, D.C. and the War Memorial of Korea in Seoul stand as solemn tributes to the sacrifices made during the conflict. These memorials serve as poignant reminders of the bravery and the heavy toll paid by those who fought. The Korean War serves as a reminder that peace is precious and must be carefully guarded. The efforts of the United Nations and other peacekeeping bodies underscore the ongoing commitment to maintaining stability and preventing future conflicts. It is a call to remember the past, to learn from the mistakes of history, and to strive for a future where dialogue and understanding replace conflict and division. The stories of veterans and the ongoing diplomatic efforts highlight the importance of remembering the lessons of the Korean War and working towards a more peaceful world. Gap 2S, Section 10, Echoes of the Past. We're talking about what happened after the Korean War, how it affected people's lives and the economy. The war changed everything on the Korean peninsula. It really hit both North and South Korea hard. In South Korea, the war left everything broken. The economy was in ruins and people were struggling to rebuild their lives. But with a lot of hard work and help from other countries, South Korea started to get better. They made smart changes to their economy and things started changing fast. Factories were built and cities grew. South Korea became a really important country in the world. If you look at Seoul today, all the big buildings and busy streets show just how far South Korea has come. North Korea went in a different direction. The war was terrible for them too, but their government made things even harder. They didn't want to trade or talk with other countries, and they spent most of their money on the military. This made the difference between North and South Korea even bigger. North Korea didn't have enough food, and their economy didn't grow. The government controlled everything very tightly, and that made life very difficult for the people living there. The Korean War also changed the world. It was a big part of the Cold War, a time when countries were divided into two groups. One group was communist and the other was capitalist. The United Nations got involved, and big countries like the United States, China, and the Soviet Union all played a part. This showed everyone how important Korea was. The war taught countries that it's important to work together and help each other. We still see the effects of the Korean War today. Korea is still divided, and that's a sad reminder of what happened. People are still working to bring North and South Korea back together. They're talking and trying to find ways to make peace. The Korean War reminds us that war is terrible, and we should always try to solve problems peacefully. The people who lived through the war, the soldiers who fought, and everyone working for peace today, their stories show us how important the Korean War was. It shows how strong people can be and reminds us to learn from history so we can make the world a more peaceful place.